Talavana ki
Jai.
ki go. So I heard a humorous story, so I thought I'd share it, and then we can start the class. It's Sri Kirti's massaging Srila Prabhupada.
Right.
And there were two substances, oils that he would use. One, I don't know if you still can get them or not, but they used to be these aluminum There were silver bottles of pure sandalwood oil.
Yeah, you can get them.
Where?
There are sources.
I mean, really? Because I mean, that and the bigger ones too.
Yeah.
Oh, those are fabulous. So anyway, he would have a small one for his head, and then the rest of his body was done with mustard seed oil. And Prabhu was very strict about, you take the oil, put it in your hand, but then put the top back on. So he did Prabhupada's head with the sandalwood oil. And then he took a handful of mustard seed oil, but he left the top off. And then he started working on his back, very diligently. Then he came around to the front to do like his legs, and he knocked over the bottom. And Prabhupada said, he said, "Oh, Prabhupada, I'm so sorry." He said, "You're such a fool. It'll take you till you're 80 years old before you have any intelligence." And so then he proceeded to, he sent him in to get something to scoop it up into a cup, and both he and Srila Prabhupada were down on the floor, because Prabhupada wouldn't waste anything. You know, we're so wasteful. But he wouldn't waste anything, and he would scoop up all they scooped up all the oil, put it into a cup, and then he proceeded to continue the massage. And then Srila Kirti, towards the end, just couldn't help it. He started just smiling and laughing. Prabhupada said, "What are you smiling? What is that laughter? What is that laughter?" He said, "Well, Prabhupada, I thought you said I could be intelligent by the time I was 80. And I've been thinking it's going to take a few lifetimes before I get intelligence." And Prabhupada had a really big laugh about that. So he said, "Thank you, Prabhupada, for blessing me. I'll have intelligence by the time I'm 80. So anyway, I thought that was sweet. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Tam Jayam Mudiriye.
Tato Jaya Mudire.
Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should first offer our respectful obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Narayana, to Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and to Srila Prabhupada, the founder, Acharya, and our spiritual master. Nama Om Vishnu Pradaya Krishna Sadaya Baladevi Srimati Bhagavatam Swastika Namaste Saraswati Gaurmani Tari Sunyavadi Pasanam. So, Mataji, can you read the Sanskrit for us? Because you're very expert on it.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Radhara Krita Nischaya.
Bradhara Krita Nischaya.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena. Prasthra
Praja Bhuvi. Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Radhara Krita Nischaya.
Radhara Krita Nischaya.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena.
Prishta Praja Bhuvi.
Prishta Praja Bhuvi.
Sarvetam Anunir Jagmur.
Jagmur.
Radhara Krita Nischaya.
Nischaya.
Kalina Dharma Mitrena.
prajabhuvi.
So I'll try it once. Okay. Sarve tam anunir jagmor.
Sarve tam anunir jagmor.
Vratara kritanishchaya.
Vratara kritanishchaya.
Kalina dharma mitrena.
Kalina dharma mitrena.
Krishvas prishta prajabhuvi.
Krishna prishta prajabhuvi. Sarve tam anunir jagmor.
Sarve tam anunir jagmor.
Bharata krita nishchayaha.
Bhratara kritanishchaya.
Kalina dharma mitrena.
Kalina dharma mitrena.
Drishtva prishtaha prajabhuvi.
Anyone? Father Priya.
Sarve tamanunir jagmor.
Sarve tamanunir jagmor.
Vratara kritanishchaya.
Vratara
Kalina dharma mitrena.
Kalidama mitraitana.
Vishvas prishta prajapati.
Yisvasvita prajabali.
Anyone? Sorry, that's in my mouth here. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama. The Guru Kulis told me from Manipur. They were trained. If you don't have water, you want to purify your hand. Put your hand next to your ear and chant the Hare Krishna mantra.
The Guru told you that?
Yeah.
What is the secret?
They said that this was when we were reinstalling Radharani Kanta and Gornitai and Jagannath in New Orleans after Katrina. Happened to be there. And the president of Atlanta, Vedasar, and a bunch of these other devotees that were from, trained up in the Gurukul in Mayapur, they were doing the puja, the reinstallation puja. And they asked me to sit in. And I hadn't done any kind of ceremony like that in a long time. I used to perform weddings and first initiations and things, but not like they have been trained. So at one point there was no Achman bowl, and it was left. They had done it, and then there was none for me. So they said, "Oh, well, just put your hands next to your ear and chant Hare Krishna." So okay, so I said, "Is that good?" He said, "Yeah, the Hare Krishna mantra is pure. Apapa Krishna is pure and prophylactic, and so the mantra can purify your hand. I mean, if nothing else. So, of course, I wouldn't recommend that as going to the latrine that way, but in that kind of emergency circumstance, that's what they said. So I took their word for it, out of the mouths of they were trained that way. So anyway, that's a side point. So I'll do the word for word. Sarve. All his younger brothers. Tam. Him. Anu near Jagmur. Anu near Jagmur. Left home by following the elder. Bratara. Brothers. Krita Nishchaya. Decidedly. Kalina. By the age of Kali. The Dharma. Principle of irreligion. Mitrena. By the friend. Drishva. Observing. Sprista. Having overtaken. Praja. Praja. All citizens. Bhuvi. On the earth. Translation. So, I'll say it then you repeat. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthir.
Younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthir
observed that the age of Kali
observe that the age of Kali
already arrived throughout the world,
already arrived throughout the world,
and that the citizens of the kingdom
and the citizens of the kingdom
were already
were already
affected by irreligious practice.
affected by irreligious practice.
Therefore they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brothers. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhisthira observed that the age of Kali had arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother. So, yeah, I've been having, but I've seen a few of the classes, so this is all about the Imam, So that means the younger brothers. That's Arjuna, Bhishma, and Sahadeva and Gokula. Okay, all four of them. Bhima, yes. So now the purport by Srila Prabhupada. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhisthira were already obedient followers of the great emperor, and they had sufficiently been trained to know the ultimate goal of life. They therefore decidedly followed their eldest brother in rendering devotional service to Lord Sri Krishna. According to the principles of Sanatana Dharma, one must retire from family life after half the duration of life is finished and must engage himself in self-realization. But the question of engaging oneself is not always decided. Sometimes retired men are bewildered about how to engage themselves for the last days of their life. Here is a decision by authorities like the Pandavas. All of them engaged themselves in favorable culturing of devotional service of the Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. According to Swami Sridhar, Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha are fruitive activities, philosophical speculations, and salvation, and as conceived by several persons, are not the ultimate goal of life. They are, more or less, practiced by persons who have no information of the ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life is already indicated by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 1864, and the Pandavas were intelligent enough to follow it without hesitation. So, the younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhisthira observed the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother. So, obviously, this is this age that, for them, just a few symptoms of the age were beginning to show, and these very virtuous personalities didn't want any part of it. They wanted to get out of here as soon as possible and prepare themselves. And it's interesting, I remember a few verses back, there's a description of Yudhisthira Maharaj, and he's taking off the clothes of a king. He's taking off his jewelry and taking the royal dress. And this is not like some. This is like probably solid emerald bracelet of gold studded with real gems. Because in those days, someone asked Prabhupada fairly recently, I heard in one conversation, they were saying, well, if they had all these valuable gems, they must have been mining. And that is listed actually in the Krishna book as one of the activities of Vaishyas. But Prabhupada said it was that the earth was so happy and pleased that it just the stones, instead of like we see all these rocks on the ground, these were emeralds and rubies, and washing up on the shores was gold. I mean, even I read this book some time back by a famous, it almost had his name, I just forgot it. He's a famous American author who writes about great achievements of the settlers of the West. I can't remember it now. Anyway, he was writing about Alaska, and he describes all the different types of people that were going there. And, most of them were coming from Northern California, where there had been a gold rush. And prior to that, the gold rush was in Georgia.
James Mitchell?
Yeah, that's it, exactly. I've been trying to remember that. He did something in South Pacific. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I was reading it, and it was a really interesting book. And thank you. I've been haunting my head for about 48 hours. So he's a very interesting writer. So his style, but it's described that at a certain point, things were drying up in California and it was getting overcrowded and all kinds of things happened. The people that are making the money are the ones that are setting up the supply shops. Mm-hmm. So, but what was it? They were saying that in Alaska, that just go along the shore of the ocean, on the beach, instead of seashells, they were just gold nuggets. Whereas, our view, if we're growing up watching the kinds of TV shows we used to watch from our generation in the 50s and the 60s, you see these miners with these little pans, and they scoop down, and they here's a little one, here's a little one. And then some throwing them all away, and then find, there's a really, I hate to sound mundane, but there's an amazing movie that was made in the 30s called The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which shows how greed corrupts. And this Humphrey Bogart and Walter Houston, it was amazing, and how they mined for this gold. And all their goal was maybe we get 5,000. Then they 5,000, no, we have to have 5,000 each. And then it has to be no, we have to get 20,000 each. And it's after a certain point, how much of it can we actually carry out? And then people are going to start getting suspicious when we're walking back through, and they start becoming very suspicious of each other. At first, it's all for one for all. We're all together in this. But all of a sudden now, everyone, and in the end, they end up mistrusting each other. One kills one of them, or thinks he kills one of them. He's killed by banditos who don't even know that he has gold. And then all the gold is taken. They think it's just bags of dust. And it's all this fine golden powder, big bags, and they throw it in the wind. Just the wind, dust in the wind. So this is the thing that everyone is lusting after this. And so, not to get off the point, but so in various ages, gold was not such a rare commodity, and it's not really rare today. There's a lot of gold. It's just a question of the trouble that you have to go to get it. They say that there's a very large vein of gold under the state of Georgia, under the city of Atlanta, but it's so deep, it's too costly to mine it. There's plenty of gold. And recently I heard that they actually opened a vault in one of the temples in South India, and the amount of gold that was in it is incalculable. And this goes back tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years, how much gold there was. So when Yudhisthira is undressing, he's taking off extremely valuable clothing. It's I was thinking, the saying, you dress for success. So now his success is that he wants to be liberated. He wants salvation. He wants to go back to Godhead. So he doesn't want all this wealthy, the attire of a king. And he just throws it aside. And so they're following in his footsteps. And it reminds me of the story of St. Francis of Assisi. I don't know how much of it is, actually, but according to the way it's described, is that St. Francis was the son of an extremely wealthy merchant in this city, Assisi, in Italy. And there had been a war, some kind of a war, and St. Francis was such a sensitive person that he couldn't stand the brutality of it and what he saw. And he started to have these really deep spiritual realizations, and he saw God in all creatures. As a matter of fact, in Australia, when Prabhupada was taken to a monastery of Franciscan monks, Prabhupada was unaware who St. Francis was, and they asked what Prabhupada thought of St. Francis, and Prabhupada asked, well, what was his philosophy? And I think it was Prabhu or Madhavisa, or both, something like that. But I kind of envisioned it. He's saying, well, they see that, I think they both were saying it. He said, well, in St. Francis saw, Sister Bird, Brother, Eagle, Sister Sparrow, Brother Eagle, Sister Moon, Brother Sun. He saw all creatures as his brothers and sisters, all creatures of God. And you see Prabhupada on the Vyasa sign, and you see his eyes get like really big. Oh, this is real God consciousness. Very respectfully, he says, oh, this is real God consciousness. And the truth is that there wasn't a dry eye in the whole place, all these Franciscan monks. And I don't remember the whole pastime, how it went, but it developed into the fact, Prabhupada started talking about Christos, Krishnas, Krishnos. It means, the anointed one. And I think it's in Greek or Aramaic language, it goes from Christos, Krishnas, Krishna. And so he was comparing and said it means the anointed one. So he started that you should all chant this Christos, Christos, Krishna. And in the end, we were actually chanting Hare Krishna. And the whole place was chanting Hare Krishna. He probably completely won them over. But he had such a deep appreciation for the philosophy of St. Francis. Now, the reason I bring this up is because when he returns home from war, he's obviously suffering from some kind of mental breakdown. People think that some people suspect that he ran away from battle, become a coward, and quite the opposite. He was having these epiphanies, spiritual realizations, and so when he came back, he was in a great fever, and so then his father's so happy that he started to come back out of this state of being sick, and so then he starts to show him all the wealth that he's made during the war, how he was able to take advantage of the soldiers and people that were worried, so that he got things that were worth, tens of thousands of dollars or lira at that time for nothing. Look at this. Look at all this. This is all ours. And then he's showing, he was mainly making garments like silk, cloth, and so on. And he had just huge bolts of silk cloth. And then, so he starts to show him how it's being dyed. And there's the whole subterranean world underneath their home of these people that work for them. And he starts to walk through it, and he can't believe the suffering of these people. That my family is living off of exploiting these people's suffering. So such and they're covered in dye and living in these little hovels. There weren't even houses. They were just, it just drove him wild. He couldn't take it. So he starts to give away all the cloth that belonged to his father and give away all the wealth that he had stored up. And he's getting up on the top of the floor of the home and throwing away all the valuable cloth and all the wealth. And when the father comes home, he's like, he's gone crazy! And he drags him to the person who's in charge of the church. I don't know if he was a bishop or a cardinal. And the cardinal is like upset because he's having to be disturbed at his time of lunch. And the way the story goes. And so then, what is the problem? And the father says, you see, my son is mad, he's crazy, he's taken all my wealth and thrown it everywhere. He's given it to everyone. All the street urchins, everyone. He's thrown away all my years of work. He's gone crazy. And he's, the cardinal says it's true, and he's saying why, and he's explaining very deep realizations of how he thinks that everything belongs to God, and we're all part of God, and we all should share in God's energy. And so it gets to the point where the father is like, he starts complaining. Look at him, he's wearing my cloth that I worked hard to provide him for. And then finally he realizes, yes, I'm wearing this cloth that has been made by this exploitation of these workers. Mm-hmm. So he starts to take them off in front of everyone. Yeah, I don't want your cloth. I renounce them. And actually, apparently, he actually is standing there without cloth. And then the cardinal is so moved by it, even though he's very cold, he comes over and puts his very valuable robe over him to cover him so that he's not standing like that. And he then renounces his father's wealth and renounces the activities in the village and goes wandering off, praying to God, what is my mission? And he finds a church that's been disheveled and it's broken down, and he wants to rebuild it. And the one interesting curiosity about it in this story is that's very similar to a pastime with Srila Prabhupada, is that what he really wants to get more than anything is concrete bricks to rebuild this church. And slowly, some of his friends, he was very popular, and he had a whole group of friends, and they were all sons of the wealthier class. And they used to party and drink, and they had girlfriends and everything. And they all start to see, and at first they're thinking he's crazy, but some of them are starting to listen to him. And some of them else are coming back from war, and they had the same kind of feeling about the whole thing. There was something not right about this. And they actually go out on kirtan in the streets. They're chanting hallelujah, praise the Lord, and they're walking around begging alms, just like a Sankirtan party. And they're all just dressed in rags. So he's really meditating on the thing that he values the most is concrete bricks to build the church. That's the best thing you can give to him. And it reminds me of a pastime with Guru Das, and I think he was with maybe Shyam Sundar, someone else who was driving the car. And it's the first time they're going to Vrindavan, the land of Krishna, with Srila Prabhupada, after having all the success in San Francisco with the Mantra Rock, and then going to London, meeting the Beatles, and making the record. Now we're going to Vrindavan with Prabhupada, the land of Krishna. Guru Das was waiting for those first words coming from Prabhupada's mouth that will really express the deepest meaning of Krishna consciousness. And there's a long silence, and Prabhupada goes, cement. And Prabhupada, cement. We need cement. He wants to build a temple. And in those days, and maybe even now, things were quota system. It was hard to get things. So it kind of reminded me of that. So it's a long way around. But again, the point is that when someone's ready to really renounce the world, Like the story of Sanatana Goswami. I'm sure it was discussed the other day. Was his disappearance or appearance day?
Disappearance.
Disappearance. And so on how Lord Chaitanya wouldn't accept him until he got rid of that one blanket that was kind of opulent. He wanted him to look the dress of a mendicant. But he gave away how much was the bribe? 10,000 gold coins?
I think it was...
First he said like 6, then 7, then 10.
He gave to the jailer 7,000 gold coins. But then to that owner of the motel, I don't remember.
Oh no, that
exactly.
was like 8 or 9. And that was 1.
7.
He held back 1.
Yeah, Ishan held back 1.
Ishan, yeah. But I heard, anyway, it could be 7, but I think the jailer ultimately got 10,000, but whatever. But he slowly, gradually, and he wanted to dress poorly, and even his life was in danger because they could figure out, they had like an astrologer or something that could tell they were carrying so many gold coins. And they knew, Sanatana didn't know how much the servant had, and the servant lied. And so their wives were still in jeopardy, but then he finally gave them all. So, and then when he did arrive, he had this one very nice blanket. And Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya said he didn't want him to come in until he gave that away, and then he put on this older, torn cloth. He said, now you look like Vaishnava. Like for instance, Maharaj Prachapurudra. Lord Chaitanya refused to see him. Many times, everybody came and implored, please, Chaitanya, he's such a good devotee, he just wants to come and see him. So, but then what he does is, he doesn't come in the dress of a king, and he sweeps in front of the Rath Yatra cart. And he changes his dress, and then Lord Chaitanya sees him as a devotee. So dress is important to a certain extent. Of course, I don't want to get into a whole issue about dress. Or did he come dressed as a king, sweeping in front of the cart?
He might have come dressed as a king, but later when he was massaging
he changed his clothes.
Mahaprabhu, then he changed his clothes.
First he sees him sweeping. He sees that service, and he's appreciating his humble service. He changes his garments. Then he gets closer and more intimate with him. So that form of... but the other point is this. I was thinking about this. There's so many things to talk about in a verse like this, about how this process is meant for kicking out all, like the verse in the Bhagavatam, the second verse of the Bhagavatam, Dharma Prochitava Tavo Kaitava. How does it go? The first line is Dharma Prochita Kaitavo Dra Paramo Nimatsaranam Satam. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavat Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. So, up to this point, this is the beginning of the Bhagavatam, which is after the whole Vedas, and this is at the point where Narada Muni is chastised and said that what you've introduced is religious activities that are meant to fulfill material desires. And that won't give them that's not the real goal of religion. And we can get into a whole discussion about that. But I wanted to just make a quick point because, is that say 10 after or 20?
It's 8:20.
Oh, okay, well, so the point is that while we're hearing all these devotees wanting to leave, because it's Kali Yuga, we've also been told that there are many demigods that are very eager to come here, because this is the one Kali Yuga in the whole day of Brahma that this particular process is available. And this is the most munificent, most magnanimous opportunity. This is the loophole, And so the demigods are lining up to come and take advantage of this very brief moment. We think it's a long time, okay? So we're 500,000 years into it. We got another 9,500 years, but that's nothing. When we're talking about, 400,000 years, I mean, the first Satyuga, Prabhupada, I heard him say it recently, the Satyuga is 1,800,000 years. In other words, 1.8 million. Then the Treta Yuga is 1,200,000 years, which is 1.2 million. Then the next is 800,000 years, and this one's 436 or 32. And right now we're at 427,000 years to go. But the demigods want to get here, and I don't want to make light of this, but it kind of reminds me of when I was in high school and in college. There were, especially back then because Vietnam was hanging over our heads. So you had to get into college. Even though if you wanted to spend some... Because I personally feel, unless someone really has a calling and knows exactly what they want to do, I always admire that. I wish I had had that kind of clarity of purpose. But I didn't. And I think in the past, in a few other generations, people would say, take a year or 2 years, see the world, travel abroad. Try to, understand who you are and what this world is. Then decide what you want to study. Or even if you want to go to college. Now it's like you're forced to do it. And by the time they finish the college, they're in so much debt that, the President Obama didn't pay it off until he was already a president of the United States.
Really?
Yeah. He still had debt. And he finished paying it off after the first or second year. And that's how bad it is. And it didn't used to be that expensive when I went to school. Mm-hmm. And I had, for athletic reasons, I was offered all kinds of scholarships. So what we would do is we would find out which teachers were liked and which schools were a breeze. So well, who are you gonna take for algebra or biology, whatever? Well, I heard, Dr. Michaels. It's a walk. He just didn't really care. He showed up to do his job. So everybody'd be fighting to get into his class, so you could just get the good grade and get out, or get a grade and get out. And same thing with certain colleges. Like there was one college, New Paltz. That was that was a school where you get your degree and and the work was, and you'd be out of the draft. But still, especially if you had the pressure of if you were given a scholarship because of your athletic ability, then you would, you have to keep your grades up, and that can be an issue because first of all the intensity of the training, and second of all, athletes have a lot of extracurricular activities. They like to have fun, materially, the party. So schoolwork is not on their main. I just speak from my own personal experience. So we looked for the angles, and even when I was for a while staying with Hridayananda Maharaj and Mukunda Maharaj. In the late 80s, early 90s, in Beverly Hills, I would go to the college that's near Westwood, UCLA. And I would just sit. It was the summertime too, so it wasn't really... But there was... and I didn't know who they were at the time, but they were all really famous college athletes, had already signed major contracts with various teams, and one of them happened to be Troy Aikman, who became the Dallas Cowboy quarterback, won Super Bowls, does all the sportscasting now. And one of them was a famous basketball player for the Indiana Pacers, Reggie something. And so I didn't know them. And but they had a coach that made sure during the summer, because they would get these scholarships. One day they're begging you for $1 for lunch. The next day they're all millionaires. And they didn't know how to manage their money, and they hadn't finished their education. And part of the contract was you have to finish your education. So there was one coach who was in charge of them during the summer, even though they were now millionaires. And because they would lose everything, even if they were successful, they would lose everything if they didn't finish and do it. So he would be over them. And then they also had to keep training. So this one coach was from Ethiopia. And I don't know how he knew, but he really liked the devotees. And we used to have really nice talks. So he would make them all come over and chant with me. And then I had all these cookies from the LA restaurant. And they were all eating. He said, now you have to eat this food. And so they were all eating the cookies. And they were all like, you see Troy Aikman and Reggie Smith or something, big, tall, real nice fellow. And some other big guy, some famous guy came. And they're going, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And everybody else, so it's Troy Aikman, it's Reggie. Come on, let's go. They all start chanting. So I come back. It didn't mean anything to read Ananda and Mukunda, they didn't know. But then when I went to tell the devotees in LA at the temple, you had Troy Aikman chanting? What? It was like, but it was one of those things that there was a confluence of, here they are trying to take advantage of a shortcut through education so that they can fulfill their obligations and still make millions and millions of dollars. They didn't have to worry about their education. And they got the shortcut of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, which is the real shortcut. I think it's a kind of analogy that, I'm not comparing the demigods to, people who are athletes or more interested in enjoying and trying to just use college in a way to kind of sneak through. But this process is a process where demigods know, if you come now, if you can get birth, any human birth in Kali Yuga, and you can keep your wits about you, you can take advantage of this process, and you can achieve something greater than in any other age in a much quicker and easier way, although a simpler way, but it's not easy. It isn't that easy. You have to really, learn how to control your mind, be humble as a blade of grass, as tolerant as a tree, offer respect to everyone. So I just thought it was an interesting comparison. Anyone have any questions? Yes?
Demigods can be either live for 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or 100,000 years, depending on where they are in the universe.
Yeah. But it's celestial years, though.
Yes. So when they look at our 10,000 year time frame,
it's short.
It's a very short time during the course of their life.
Yeah.
So they have to be very focused to be able to attain that target.
Yeah. But also the other point I was making is that the similarities between a saint in Christianity and how he saw the trappings of material wealth as an obstacle. And there's a great scene where he goes, finally he gets an audience with the Pope. And when he sees all the wealth in the Vatican at that time, it was just, and then on the way in, he saw all the people that were living in the streets and how they were suffering. And he, instead of saying the right words, he spoke the truth. And most of the cardinals wanted to banish him. But then the Pope has this moment of clarity and supports him. Because some cynical people say that he did it just to get the poor to, not revolt against the wealth of the church. But I find that it's not that money itself is evil, but it can corrupt even a pious person. It can get in the way. So, but you see how when Yudhisthira and his brothers, they immediately just put it down. Well, I'm going to go, but I really do need this jewel-studded umbrella made with special cloth to protect me from the sun. And those slippers that were given to me by the Vayu, I really think they would be necessary. Because it's going to be stones and rocky. The roads aren't very good up there in the mountains, are they? So it's little things like that. They want to bring a few little things, and maybe I could just bring like a blanket. You think? Just maybe one blanket at night I can cover myself. No, leave it all behind. All your possessions, and they had possessions. Yeah, but can't I just bring one servant who can cook for me? No, you have to eat whatever nature provides you. No shoes? No. No umbrella for the sun? No. Everything left behind. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Prabhupada! Jai Prabhupada! Jai Sri Radha